Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. I'm really excited to have everybody here and participating on our webinar. We're going to be showcasing a collaborative case study with the Las Vegas Valley Water District and Gimmal and Morae Company. I'm Christina Hill. I'm going to be kicking things off. Today's session will be exploring how the Las Vegas Valley Water District teamed and partnered with the Gimmal, a Morae company, to strengthen their information governance program within SharePoint. You'll hear how user feedback helped shape product enhancements and how this collaboration evolved into a lasting partnership focused on innovation and measurable results. A few housekeeping items for those that may or may not be new to Zoom. If you look down below, you should see a toolbar. There's a Q&A button. Double click that, pop that open. If at any time during the presentation you have some questions, toss it in there and we'll try to get it to at the end. For those of you who are asking, yes, we are recording this. We will be sharing that and any related materials with the email that you used at registration. Without any further ado, I will go behind the stage and kick this over to you, Signa. Thank you.
Hi, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be giving this webinar today in conjunction with Gimmal/Morae and one of our staff who have been working on this project from General Networks. My name, like Christina said, is Signa Gunlack. I'm the Information Governance Manager at the Las Vegas Valley Water District, and I have been a member of the team that helped create this division for about 9 years now. I'm really excited to be here today and talk about how we have collaborated to enhance governance to have effective content management. I'm going to pass it over to Ali Warsey from General Networks, and he's going to introduce himself. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ali Warsey. As Signa mentioned, I'm representing the IAM division of General Networks. We have been working alongside Las Vegas Valley Water District for several years now on the implementation of the Gimmal software for classification and governance. Happy to be here. I'll pass it on to Craig.
Great. Thanks, Ali. Thanks, Signa. Hi, everybody. My name is Craig Carpenter. I'm the Senior Managing Director and General Manager of the Information Governance Unit at Morae, before which I was the CEO of Gimmal. Very excited to be here today to talk about the success story that Las Vegas Valley Water District is. Turn it back over to you, Signa.
We have a robust agenda today, and that includes an overview of the classification and governance project that we did here at the district. Then I'm going to talk about the initial partnership that we had with Gimmal to apply records content in SharePoint and what General Networks' role was. And then third, after we had deployed the Gimmal software, we got some user feedback that made us go back and look at the software, and that's what led to number 4, some enhancements that we worked on collaboratively over the past year to that software. And then we're then going to discuss the benefits and the outcomes of creating a strategic alliance and how it's important in information governance and in other sectors of the workforce. And then we're going to end with Q&A. We have already received some questions, so we'll tackle those first and then try to get to any other questions that you may have, you may throw in the chat during this presentation. With that being said, I will start off by talking about classification and governance, the project that we started here 9 years ago at Las Vegas Valley Water District. We have termed it Atlas, and why we had a business need at the district to organize and manage the district's content in a manner that supported, first of all, a seamless and secure access by end users. We knew 9 years ago that in about 5 years after that, so we're in the midst of it right now, that we were facing what we called a silver tsunami. And that is a lot of folks who had been at the district for a very long time were facing retirement. And when we really talked about forming a governance division and really spearheading what it would be like to manage content, we asked users what was the most important thing it came to. What did users need at the district? And everybody talked about if they needed a record or if they needed a document, whether it was a Word document or an Excel file, they never really knew quite where to go in terms of databases or systems. However, they did know who to call. And by calling someone, that person would then find the information that they needed. Knowing that we were facing a retirement uptick, preserving institutional knowledge became a top priority of this project. And then lastly, we wanted to ensure that we have compliance with our regulatory requirements. So in terms of the records retention schedule and the policy that it adheres to, we wanted to ensure that we were under compliance, because if we're asked for a record, we should have it, unless it's not a legal hold or it no longer meets retention. So those were some of what we looked at when we started working at organizing content that was unstructured. So the focus of this project that we've been working on for years now was to look at content on letter drives, so on the old on-prem systems that wasn't structured, and we wanted to, first of all, clean it, look at it, and move the content that was needed into Microsoft's M365. And then we were going to apply governance. So we're going to talk about what was the foundation work that we had to do before we started cleaning all of the content and moving it and applying the retention schedule. A lot of work had to happen behind the scenes to even get us to that point. So when I talk about building a foundation, there is a number of key factors that had to happen. First of all, we had to have executive sponsorship. If you want a project like this that exceeds $10 million, that has looked at, cleaned up, reviewed 50 million files, you have to make sure that this is something that you have buy-in from the top. And I was very fortunate, and our team was fortunate, that we did have executive sponsorship in order to complete this task. And actually, the direction came from executive leadership. So I'm very lucky, because often I hear from folks who want to do a project and they see a need to do a project like this one. And their struggle is, how do we get the executive leadership on board? For me, that part of it was fairly easy, but we had to do a lot of justification in terms of the parts and the pieces. And that's where the formation of a steering committee came into play. It's really important, if you're going to do a massive governance project, that you have folks on a committee who represent the users of the content and the data. And for us, that was over 12 departments. The folks who are on our committee are able to make decisions, and so higher leadership, and they have a stake in what we do in order to make it successful. So we put a steering committee together back in 2016 for the sole purpose of looking at how we were going to organize this unstructured content. And then the committee has evolved with really making sure that, do we have the policies and the procedures adhered to? We report to them. We used to report to them monthly. Now that we have a cadence and we're kind of near this project's end, we report to them several times a year, and they make decisions if we need them to in terms of the strategic direction that we're moving towards. We have an organized core team of folks of about 5 people from different sectors with different backgrounds in governance. And that team meets weekly. And we are the ones who put together the strategic agenda, and we organize how the project has gone forward. And when we saw, for example, that we needed to make some Gimmal enhancements, we put together a plan that would allow us to partner with Gimmal to do that successfully. Then there's always the internal resources and budgeting. And I would say, to put a project like this together, it's one thing to say you need money, but I have really spent a lot of time over the past several years justifying, tracking what we do, how much of it we do, so I can give those detailed numbers to our stakeholders. And I believe that has made a huge difference. And then there's building the project roadmap. After you have the team together, you have the executive leadership, you have the committee, then you have to get to the planning process. And so I'm going to walk through just the high level detail of our project roadmap and what it's looked like from way back in 2016 to where we are today. So I would say to those of you who have never done this, I think having a project roadmap really helps define and set clear objectives and standards and behind the scenes, and then having a visual like this, that sort of higher level that just summarizes what you're doing, is really beneficial when you are presenting to a steering committee or you are going to stakeholders. So we call this journey the Atlas Program Journey, otherwise known as our roadmap for the cleaning up the content from the letter drives and moving that content into SharePoint. And if you look at the number 1, our journey began by really having the right people in the room to develop and implement a data placement strategy. And that's where General Networks came into play. They had done this with a lot of folks, and they had the expertise to help assist that. We didn't make those decisions on our own as governance. Governance division in our organization reports to legal services. So we did have legal input in terms of governance. We had lawyer input, but also when it came to the data placement strategy, we had to partner with information technology because they are very important partners in putting a roadmap together. And then we had to make sure we had information standards. And then we looked at the software way back a long time ago. And so when we chose Microsoft's M365, in 2016, it didn't have the tools it does today. But some of the tools that we needed were tools to clean up content, to migrate content, and then to apply governance. And that's way back then is when we started looking at the tools like Gimmal. And we also purchased another set of tools to do the migration and the cleanup as well. We then started working on what Project 1 was. And if you see the number 2 on the roadmap, that Project 1 was cleanup and migration. Initially, if you see the number 2 and the number 4, those two used to be sandwiched together. But there was this little thing that happened called COVID. And if you remember, that kind of changed a lot of companies' direction because of resourcing or lack thereof, or refocusing where resources needed to be during the pandemic. And so we were getting ready to go department by department, look at the content a department had on letter drives, clean it up, migrate the applicable content that users needed, that still had a retention and that was on legal hold, to that data structure and all those folders and libraries that we set up in SharePoint. Then we were going to immediately work with the same folks and apply the records retention schedule, really get to that compliance part that you see in number 4. What we saw during COVID was we had already turned Teams on, and we saw group by group, and we got email and call after call saying, you know what, I just needed to lift 1,000 files because I can't be in the office, but one person is. And so they just moved all these files that we had from on-premise into Teams. And so it kind of became us chasing our tails to try to get around that, because if any of you are matter experts when it comes to SharePoint, if you lift too much content, or you don't have the right tools, or you don't do it the right way, you can in fact lose metadata. You might think you've copied files over, but you might not have. And so to get ahead of that curve and to get ahead of people needing to be able to do their jobs during the pandemic from home, we opted to split the project in half and just clean up and move the content that people needed right away so they could be safe working at home. And then we decided to put off the governance side until further on down the road. And that gave us a little bit of time to analyze what we had done, the structure we had put in place, and really work with the departments under number 2 to clean up the content and move it appropriately. So we did that, number 2. And then, we came on the other side of COVID and we thought, let's take a look at the tools and make sure for number 3 that the tools that we have are working and that we're in a good place before we start what we then call Project 2, classification and governance. And so we did some work in between. And in 2023, we kicked off what you see here is number 4. We clicked off the classification and governance of the content that we moved into SharePoint. And I'm happy to say that we have 6 departments to go. And so we're a little over halfway there. And we have seen during this process that, and what I'm going to pass the presentation over to Ali to talk about is, since we had some time to digest and kind of re-examine what we were using, we had a few departments start to use the Gimmal tool. And it was a great tool, but we got feedback from users that they would like to see and use the tool differently in order to inform them to do their jobs better. And we're going to talk about how our company went to the table with Gimmal, now Morae, and how we successfully made changes that not only benefited the district, but also benefited Morae and their customers going forward. So that is the program journey. Before I pass it over to Ali, though, I'm going to pass it over. If we can go to the next slide, we're going to ask you, we're just curious for the users attending the presentation today, where are you on your journey? Are you planning? Are you in a cleanup phase? Are you mid that and you're doing some more planning to really look at a more structured approach before you apply governance? Or are you past that? Are you looking beyond, perhaps to other applications because you've done something this big already? And so perhaps you're doing something else. So we're going to give you the opportunity to vote. And I'm going to be quiet while I give you a little bit of time. Okay, so thank you, Christina. She has sent us a screenshot of those compiled results. And so on this call today, we have just under half of the callers who are in the planning phase. And my advice to folks who are starting off something like this, a well-laid plan that has all of the parts and pieces that you need is the most important aspect of a project of this caliber to do. And so not only did we just look at data placement strategy, but we also, on my side of the house, we looked at policies and procedures that we may need, and we made sure those were in place and had those, really completed by 2018. And we also developed a change management and communications plan. And that was really important because we wanted to identify what stakeholders we needed to talk to when. And so those are some additional parts of planning. For those of you in the cleanup and migration phase, that is a heavy lift. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, again, knowing how much work we did, but my hat goes off to all of you. And then we have some folks who are in that classification and governance. And I'm sure that Ali's part of the presentation will be really interesting to you. And then we are looking at folks who have further enhancements. So that's a great mix. Craig and Ali, do you want to say anything with in terms of this?
Just from our perspective, this aligns pretty well with what we see, especially for an event like this. People at the planning or initial stages want to learn from what people like you, Cigna, and Ollie as a partner have done. So this is pretty much what we would have expected.
Yep. And I'll be speaking to a lot of the step 4 classification and governance related things as we address sort of what that looked like at the district. All right. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'd like to start by sharing our experience with the initial deployment of Gimmal. We're going to focus on the legal department, which was the first department to go live in Project 2 for classification and governance. As Signa mentioned earlier, thanks to COVID and the program really being split into 2 projects, the time that had elapsed between when Gimmal was selected as the platform to facilitate records review to when it was actually first implemented was several years. So as the legal team and the early departments who had gone live began using the platform, they quickly encountered several practical challenges that weren't fully apparent during the planning phases. One of the biggest challenges was the sheer volume of expired content. And this was really a result of us doing things a bit differently as part of our engagement process in comparison to other traditional records management programs. So in addition to official records, we decided to bring non-records under governance as well. And so the thought really behind this was we put in all this time and effort cleaning up our redundant, obsolete, and trivial content. We didn't want to end up back where we started. So since we were tagging all non-records as part of the classification exercise anyways, we made it an option for departments whether they wanted to include non-records as part of the review. And almost all departments that we've engaged with so far have decided to include non-records, legal being one of them. In addition to the non-records, we also included files that were intentionally left on file shares. And those were due to various reasons, being things like unsupported formats in SharePoint. We have engineering drawings and infrastructure management who have a lot of GIS-related files. So the decision to leave those specific content types in the file shares allowed us to govern those in place using the Gimmal platform. And again, this in turn led to that higher volume of expired content. One of the things we were hearing a lot was that all expired files were appearing in a single inbox, which made it extremely difficult and time-consuming for users to process them efficiently. In addition to that, there were limited abilities to filter and search within the review interface, which added to the challenge as users struggle to locate specific records or narrow down their review lists. And so one of the reasons for that limited ability to filter and search was that the number of columns that were made available in the view were restricted, which meant that the users couldn't see all the information they needed at a glance. We spent a lot of time enriching our files with metadata, such as who owns this file, what bucket code should be applied, tying it to the retention schedule, what is the trigger date. So all of these pieces of information were helpful to our users when completing their review, and we weren't able to see all of these columns at one go before the enhancements. And so these hands-on experiences and internal feedback really made it clear that enhancements to the product were necessary in order for us to meet our operational goals and to improve usability. And this feedback really set the stage for a collaborative effort to address these challenges and enhance the software for everyone. And so next, I'm going to talk about our partnership with Gimmal. And so I want to highlight the strong partnership we developed with Gimmal throughout this process. This was instrumental in us addressing the gaps that we identified during our initial rollout. Together, we prioritized enhancements that would have a broader impact, benefiting not only the district, but also other customers using the Gimmal platform. One of the key improvements we saw was the introduction of batch processing. This allowed us to efficiently review both SharePoint and file share content at scale. And this was essential given the volume we were managing, several millions of files. During the initial planning phases, we decided that we wanted our users who were completing the review, we call them knowledge specialists at the district, to review content on a quarterly basis. So with batch processing, we were able to configure batches to be created on the first of each quarter, and the division of these batches gave us better visibility as to what records expired in each quarter and we were able to better stay on top of the users we were supporting who were completing their reviews. We understood that the first batch would be the largest and most time-consuming, as it would encompass all records and non-records that were classified that had already met their retention requirement. So again, a little more hand-holding for that first batch as the users work through that larger list of expired content. To support the quarterly batches, an additional enhancement we saw was to the notification scheduling. This gave us more options, making it easier for users to stay informed and engaged with the process. The user interface was also improved, more filtering and searching capabilities, as well as support for more custom columns, as mentioned previously, making all the information they needed to see visible at a glance. It made for an overall much more intuitive review process. And the last thing I want to speak to is the endpoint data outputs. So there was some reporting capabilities out of the box with Gimmal, but given the extent of the program and the knowledge management aspect of Atlas, we wanted to be able to gain additional insights. So thanks to Gimmal's enhancements, they made additional data endpoints available to us, which we were then able to tap into and in-house created using custom Power BI reports to support both the knowledge managers as well as the users completing the review. And so these reports covered various topics, things like for the users, from the SharePoint sites that are being managed, what are all of the files that are unclassified? What are the files that I need to go back and make sure I tag with the appropriate metadata that it needs? Other reports included, from a knowledge management perspective, where in the review workflow is a record sitting right now, right? Depending on the criticality of a file, there may be several reviewers that need to have visibility on a particular file before it's dispositioned. So having that oversight and the insights from these reports really helped support both our knowledge managers as well as our knowledge specialists who were completing the reviews. So really, these enhancements led to stronger compliance and greater operational efficiency, making our records management solution more powerful and adaptable. So I'm proud of the accomplishments we've completed together, and I'm grateful for Gimmal's responsiveness and partnership throughout this journey. And with that, I'm going to be passing it over to Craig.
Thank you, Ali. And so thank you both, Signa and Ali, for doing a great job setting the stage here. So I just wanted to say a few words from kind of the vendor, the software provider perspective. We have roughly 450 customers, and so we see customers of all different shapes and sizes, and more importantly, maturity levels. And so, we deal with a lot what we call, purchasers versus partners. And there's nothing wrong with either. But if you have a relatively immature from a records management or a RIM, program perspective customer, they tend to purchase software and then they'll just kind of build a workflow around, how the software works. And so that's contrasted with a partner who's oftentimes more mature, and they may already have a workflow or they may need a certain type of workflow. And so, not all workflows are created equal. And with that many customers, as you would imagine, we get a lot of feature requests, enhancement requests, et cetera. And if there's one team's time that is the most important in any software business, it's the development team, right? It's the R&D team. Because at the end of the day, what our job to do is to solve business problems for people like Cigna, and we need to continue to innovate to do that. So when a customer like Las Vegas Valley comes to us, and they have, as you've just seen, a very mature, well thought out program and approach and strategy. And they have a very capable, systems integrator and partner like General Networks. We look at those requests a little bit differently. And then when the enhancement requests that Cigna and General Networks comes to us with will candidly make the product and the experience better for all customers. We look at those even more differently. And so when that scenario arises, as it arose here, And people like Cigna and General Networks are willing to, have and maintain and even put more, kind of what we call skin in the game. We all come together and we truly have a partnership, because what we're trying to do again is to make the problem solving aspect of things easier for everybody. Um, and then, as the project continues, especially when you have three parties, when something doesn't go as planned, which happens in about 100% of projects, as we all know,
Mhm.
it can be a challenge. And so that's where you really need to have the partnership and lean on the partnership, and things like trust are so important. And I would say, and Ollie might say this as well, perhaps not on the record, especially when you have three parties involved, things can get interesting, right? As the vendor, oftentimes the vendor gets blamed, even when it's not always necessarily our fault. It's just kind of life, right? It's how it works. In this particular case, both General Networks and especially Las Vegas Valley did a terrific job with us of, setting that aside and not focusing on, well, why did things go sideways, and more a function of, okay, well, how do we fix it? No matter if it's, if it's due to us or if it's due to General Networks or Las Vegas Valley, it's kind of irrelevant. The point is to have the outcome that Cigna and her team wants, and the one that she presented to her board. And so let's all kind of roll up our sleeves and get there. And so, this is a great example of where, on the vendor side, we look at things a little differently, because you have a customer and an integrator that's really going to help us get better at what we do. And so it's really, it's a virtuous goodness for everybody. So we're very proud of this project. We're happy that, we all worked together here as a team, and, we're going to continue moving the ball forward, because customers that we call lighthouse customers like Cigna, they really help make us better at what we do, which, is something we're very grateful for.
Thank you so much, Craig. I really appreciate that. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up the presentation part, but we're excited to take a look at questions that you may have. And we're going to start off by looking at some of the questions that were submitted prior to the presentation today. So we'll take a look at those first. So I can start off, or Ali, do you want to read the questions?
Sure. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So the first question that was submitted was, what was Las Vegas's business case for using Gimmal instead of just Purview? What value functionality did Gimmal bring that Purview wouldn't have? And Cigna, if you're okay with it, I can take a first stab at that one. And so first thing I'd like to start with is, we know that the Microsoft landscape is always changing. Every few months or so, we see new capabilities that address more and more of the gaps that we initially found. The main driver for us to go with Gimmal as opposed to Microsoft at the time the product was selected was its ability to manage records outside of M365. So we talked about the file shares that we were also able to govern in place due to those unsupported formats in SharePoint. And so I would say that was the main driver for us to go with the Gimmal platform, because it allowed for us to govern file share content in addition to content in SharePoint. And at the time the product was selected, there was a lot of overlap where both tools had the capabilities of doing things the same way, but we found that Gimmal often did it better. Things like being able to set duration-based retention, event-based retention. And so these were, again, drivers for us to go for the Gimmal platform as opposed to Microsoft's out-of-the-box records management features. Cigna, you have anything you'd like to add to that one before we go to the next one?
Thank you.
Perfect. All right. And the second question was, who is responsible to set retention periods for the data stored in the cloud? Is it IT or the records office, in line with policies guiding the data, information, and records management of an organization?
Oh, thanks. I'll take this question. And that's a great question. And thank you. We had the Central Bank of Nigeria records coordinator, Dehiru Seni Zago, who submitted this question. I really appreciate it. I would say that, first of all, depending the place that the record is stored does not govern or define what the retention should be. Rather, it is the record type that defines what the retention should be. Let me give you an example. So we have a records retention schedule, and that schedule works, we have it defined across our entire organization. We implemented that schedule with the work and listening to stakeholders folks from engineering, human resources, public resources, finance, you name it. We work with users. We set a retention schedule that not only adhere to the state and federal guidelines, so Nevada state statutes and federal statutes, and then ultimately legal services is the issuer and the issuee of the records retention policy that has the embedded schedule in it. That then is taken by me to the general manager, who has board authority to sign off. So he signed off on the initial schedule that we put together, and we have our records organized by big buckets. And then we do a review that aligns with our Nevada state legislature. They meet every other year and they make changes to the schedule. And so when they make changes, we look at those changes every other year. We then reach back out to all the stakeholders, and then we initiate changes within the retention schedule, get that approval by our senior attorney, and then take it up to the general manager to sign off. That is a continuous process because records retention can change, laws can change. Then, depending on where a record is, we apply that same records retention, whether it's in the cloud or it's on premise or it's a hard copy. That remains the same. We're lucky that we have Gimmal, so we can apply the records retention in SharePoint. We have some applications where we can purchase out-of-the-box software and do it, and we have some situations where we can't, and that's more of a manual process, and that's a lot of work for the person who's in charge of that application to manage those records. I hope I've answered your question.
Perfect. The next question was, our organization is in the midst of setting up a board governance committee, attending to figure out some more tips on keeping this organized.
I think that I'll take this question too, if you don't mind, Craig and Ali. I would say there's a number of items that you need to set up a steering committee. You need to have a stakeholder who is from the executive team, a person who wants to do that and who's on board. And then we also, in our organization, we have an executive sponsor. So we have a gentleman who his background wasn't governance, but his background was data and data management, who leads a very large department. And he really was and still is the overseer, the executive sponsor of our steering committee, and he leads that steering committee. So he meets with directors if there are any questions. He ensures that people attend meetings. And then you need someone like me who keeps everything organized. So behind the scenes, I'm setting up meetings a year ahead of time, making sure that the users can attend, setting up very detailed agendas. If something needs to be voted on, I talk to the executive sponsor and make sure that he's prepared to take it to vote. I do the analysis that's needed to make the right governing decisions. And so by having all of those component parts and the right people on the committee, then that cadence and that strategic alliance is built and it's kept. We take videos, we do notes, we summarize after every steering committee. And what we ask the members, if you're not a director of the committee, we ask for those folks on the committee to send those summary slides, to meet with their director, to talk to their director, so that the director may choose to talk to the departments about what information governance steering committee is rolling out. And so it takes really a village, and it takes multiple forms of communications to get something and implement it and keep it going for this long.
And Signa, I'd just like to add, from what we've seen in our perspective, and we've done this many times, is that it is absolutely critical to have the executive sponsorship and the steering committee, because it aligns all of the competing priorities you see between IT and IG, where IT is mainly concerned more about the tools and the software. They don't have that governance focused lens that IG brings to the table. So again, key aspect to successful project as it relates to governance. All right. Next question is how to deal with records outside of a repository.
Would one of you guys like to take that? Or if not, I can.
I have a quick answer. Buy Gimmal software, and we can help you with that. No, in all candor, and I think Ali talked about this earlier, and I joke, but it's actually serious. a lot of customers buy our software because even where Purview can work to meet their needs, if they have less stringent needs and requirements and need less kind of granular functionality, you still have content outside of a Microsoft ecosystem, right? You have file shares, you have desktops, you have laptops, you have things like Box and Google Workplace, et cetera, and you still need a way to get out that. So we have a lot of customers that we work with to address just those types of scenarios. Ollie, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I was just going to say, use the Gimmal software. That's what's worked for us here at the district. But you'll note that some third-party applications often offer their own additional modules or components that will allow you to apply retention within the applications themselves as well. And that's all I'd really add there. All right. The last question that was pre-submitted before we get to the open questions from chat is, I'm interested in how workspaces are created, managed, secured in SharePoint. How is retention applied? So I can take that one. And so
Okay.
we know that retention is managed through Gimmal for both SharePoint and file share content. And as those records meet their retention requirements, they're surfaced in the Gimmal tool in those batches now, thanks to the enhancements, and users are notified that they have items pending action. We also like to consider sort of container management. So for new teams and SharePoint libraries, we use the tool AvePoint to limit site provisioning so that new site requests adhere to sort of our managed properties and they're configured in line with the rest of the organization's content. Signa, would you like to add anything for that one?
No, excellent answer.
Perfect. All right, and that concludes the 5 pre-submitted questions. We do have a question from chat, which is, what was the total cost of the project? What is the estimated ROI from the project?
Total cost of the project by the time we're done will be $13 million. And that includes software, consultants, multiple types of software, planning. That also includes staff time that we put in. A lot of people ask me the ROI, and I would say that, it's hard to put a number to that. But what I will say is being able to find your stuff and be able to disposition content that you don't need is very important when it comes to litigation. And being in the water, being in the water district, having water in the desert, we always have to think about, should we keep something that we no longer have a business need for, that's not under legal hold, that's not under retention? Because if you do e-discovery, and if you have it, you have to collect it, you have to produce it. And that's where the cost of production gets really high. And so it's really important to follow those laws, those policies around retention and those guidelines, because that is where the cost can kind of add up. And also over time, looking for things or not being able to find what you need when you need it. And you cannot put a number on that. And so that's what I always tell people.
Well, just to add one thing to that, Signa, one other thing that some other customers deal with is, you can attach a cost per document that gets exfiltrated as part of a cyber incident. Especially a document that has personally identifiable information, or it's got sensitive information or customer information, right? And so, really making sure that obviously keep what you need to keep, as Signa and Ollie talked about, but also making sure you can get rid of that which you're not supposed to keep is just as important. And you can build an ROI case in that vector as well.
Great question. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Well, we want to thank you for your time today. It was a great opportunity for us today to speak to you, and we hope you have a lovely rest of your week, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll be sending out the deck and recording here shortly. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye all.